Welcome to People Helping People, the podcast to help social entrepreneurs build greater businesses so that they can have a stronger impact. Today on this episode, I'm going to do a deep dive into new ways to really learn about your customer and build stronger revenue streams. I think quite often I run into these social entrepreneurs who are very passionate about the impact that they're creating in the world. And there's almost this hesitation to build a real business model in order to solve that social impact. And I think it's scary for a lot of social entrepreneurs because the reason that you're doing it is because you're so passionate about the great impact that you're going to create. But at the same time, if you can figure out a really strong business model, then that is going to help you scale and grow and have an impact at a much higher magnitude for whatever you want to do. I think this is really hard to do this. Like for me personally, I got into this work because I love the way that I was getting engaged in my community. I love the conversations that I had. I love that I felt like I was doing something by connecting with people, exploring ideas, and having conversations that actually led to some new ideas. And, you know, I'm not really an altruistic guy, but I love that feeling of connection. And I love feeling like, yeah, there's something I can do to show up to my community and make life better. Because when we make life better for other people in our community, that ripples back towards us and that lifts us up as a whole. Now, I've always been very fortunate to be here in Columbus, Ohio, where I think we have one of the strongest social enterprise ecosystems in the country. Like we actually have an ecosystem that's supporting people starting businesses that have a social impact. And yet people really do struggle coming up with solid revenue ideas of like how they can generate revenue and build a real business alongside of creating that impact. So that's a bit of what I want to dive in today is like, what are some new ways of doing that? Now, I've supported entrepreneurs for a while, helping them grow their business models, figure things out. And I realized that I didn't know how to do this either. I think for me, I grew up through a path in technology, right? Where I started building a technology platform, grew to the level of a CTO, kind of overseeing that technology, working with corporate partners, but I never had to sell. I never was out there directly building those relationships. And as I got more into this work, building a revenue stream around my own work that I'm doing, I realized one, that it's very scary to have conversations and tell the world, here's my offer of what I'm selling. Would you like to buy it? While still feeling genuine about the work that I'm doing and the value that I'm delivering. And it's funny, there's this kind of imposter syndrome that I think pops up with a lot of entrepreneurs of like, hey, is what I'm doing actually creating value? So I want to work through a framework today that I've learned about creating impact. And this was for me personally. I joined Ali Abdaal's Lifestyle Business Academy in order to figure this out. Now, I followed Ali Abdaal for a long time. He's known for his part-time YouTuber Academy, where he helps people understand the basics of creating content and posting on YouTube. And last fall, he came up with this 1K challenge of how to earn $1,000 online over 5 or 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, I want to know how to do that. How do you actually earn money online? And there were a few things that really stood out in this program. One, we were in a group of 1,000 people trying to figure this out. And really that energy of feeding off of each other, coming up with ideas and posting it. But there was something really brilliant about this 1K challenge, which I thought was like, hey, this is exactly what we're doing with our social entrepreneurs. We're coming up with little tests to understand our target audience and their willingness to pay. Now in the 1K challenge, the way this started was coming up with offers of a digital product that we could sell. And the boundaries were, we're going to get experience selling by putting an offer together for a product we haven't built yet, but one that with our current knowledge and expertise, we could build in 2 to 7 hours. So a very small digital product that was going to be priced at $10, right? And $10 is a very easy throwaway amount for somebody. And the idea was like, all right, can you craft an offer where somebody is willing to pay you $10 for that? And in the program, we were like seeing offers that were interesting. We were buying them from each other. And then we were learning out how to market that kind of on social media and reach a wider audience. And for me, it brought up a lot of fears, right? I had fears around selling and saying, hey, would you support me? But there was something interesting about being able to put something out there and get somebody who was interested who said, yes, I'll buy your offer. And then being able to go and build that, knowing that I had already had one sale. Now, when an offer didn't resonate and you didn't get any sales, that was a pretty good indication that you weren't on the right track. And so you had a chance to go back and change your offer or come up with a new one and put it out there to see, do I get a better response with this? When we were doing that, I was reading through all these different offers that people were putting out there. And I started seeing a pattern with the ones that were successful. Like one, they spoke to a very clear deliverable of like, here's a problem that I'm solving, and here's how this digital product will move you forward and getting closer to that solution. And I think there was a really neat framework that emerged, right? So when you're in a business of any sort, you have some target audience whom you're trying to solve a problem for. And if you understand that desired outcome of what they're trying to achieve by solving that problem, then you can start to develop solutions that help them get there. And so your offer doesn't have to always create that dream outcome in its totality, but sometimes it can move a person along from one stage to the next, getting them closer to that dream outcome. Over time, you can fill in with different offers that help get your target audience to that dream outcome on a much bigger scale. And so we were starting with a baby step of like, what's one way we can move somebody along 1 inch on that journey with a small digital product that would be a no-brainer to buy. For me, this was a big shift, because usually it's like when I'm working with entrepreneurs, it's like, all right, what's my business model? What's the big thing I'm building that I'm then going to go figure out how I'm going to sell it once I figured out my solution? In this case, we were starting with something really small, and we weren't even making the thing. It was like something we could make in 2 to 7 hours. And it was like, no, you can't build it until you get one sale. So we were basically writing offers and then seeing if we could sell them. And then once we got one sale, the next challenge was, hey, can you sell that 9 more times? Can you share this on social media and start talking to people and get those additional sales in? And I think that kind of shift in thinking from like, oh, I have to go and build something that I can go and sell, to like, what's a small revenue test that I can do to see the willingness to pay in order to solve a problem that my target audience has. Now, this has a couple components to it, right? So the first off is like, how do you know who your target audience is? Now, for a social entrepreneur, this gets blurred really quickly, right? Because your business exists to create a social impact. But as a business, you also have customers, people who are actually paying you. And sometimes those are 2 different people, right? So for example, you might have an employment model where you're employing somebody who has barriers to entry. In a sense, the people that you're impacting aren't your customers. They're your employees. They're part of your company. And so your company still has some business offering where it has other customers. So I think there's this challenge in the social entrepreneurship world of balancing these 2 different kind of audiences that you have. You have the audience that you're creating impact for and the audience that you're selling to. And sometimes, you're trying to impact somebody who has some inequality, right? Something that creates a barrier for them in their life. But they're not the one paying for the service. It's like maybe a caretaker, or maybe a school system or a nonprofit is paying for that experience. And so it's like, how do you understand the needs of the person who's paying versus the person that you're delivering impact to? And really, I think a lot of the work at the beginning is just understanding who is the target audience that I want to serve, and creating a map of like, here's my target audience for the people who I'm impacting, and here's the target audience for the people who I am selling to. Getting a good picture of who that is. Now, the next step, whenever you have an idea of who you want to help, is to have conversations with them. I refer to this all the time, but there is this fantastic book by Rob Fitzpatrick called The Mom Test. And I love this book because it really dives in deep to asking good questions that actually get you answers back for your business. And one of my big takeaways from this book was like always this tendency to find your target audience and go and be like, hey, here's a solution I have to your problem. Do you think it's a good solution? Would you buy it? And people are like, yeah, that's a great idea. And that kind of questioning never gives you any value. Whereas in the Mom Test, Rob Fitzpatrick really encourages you to go and learn about people's experience without mentioning what your solution is or what you're trying to do. Sometimes not even mentioning the problem that you're solving, right? And so you could be asking about somebody's experience with, services in their neighborhood. And if they mention the service that you're targeting, great, that's a signal that it's something that's of value. And then you can dive in and figure out how much solving that problem is worth to them. And what that means is like figuring out with questions like, how motivated are they to solve this problem that you're trying to fix for them? Like, what's their motivation? What have they tried in the past? Maybe something is mildly annoying, but they've never done anything to fix it in their life. Well, sometimes that's a good sign of like, yeah, they're not going to pay you money to fix it if they've just ignored it so far. But if they've actively gone out, tried other programs, tried other systems, tried paying money to fix this, trying to come up with like homegrown solutions to fix this problem in their life, then there you can see through conversation that there's motivation to fix this and a willingness to pay. As you start to understand that, you can develop better offers in order to move people along in the journey. So the first side of figuring out a good offer that you can sell with is just like understanding your target audience, having conversations with them, doing some direct outreach. The second side to this was really coming in and figuring out a good offer. Like, what's an offer that describes how you're going to solve a problem and move somebody closer to their dream outcome? And for me, this other light bulb went off that, quite often when we're starting our ventures, we think in terms of like, okay, we need to fix this entire problem. Quite often it's like, that's not going to work because the problem is just really big. If there was an easy solution, people would go out and haven't already solved it. It's especially true on the social impact side of your business, right? So yeah, a business, let's say you have dirty clothes and you want them cleaned. Yeah, you can build a laundromat that cleans those clothes. That's a known process and you can go and figure that out. You don't have to test people's willingness to pay. You have to understand, hey, is this the right fit for the market? So when you think about the world of social entrepreneurship, I think the key here is for the impact that you're delivering, you have to figure out this exact same thing. Like, am I delivering my impact in the way that's needed by the people that are experiencing whatever this adversity is that you're trying to solve? And it doesn't have to be solving the problem in its entirety. If it's a key issue in your community, there's probably a nonprofit that's already serving that and addressing that need. And this is where the cool thing comes in. As a social enterprise, even if you're a for-profit company, quite often you can partner with other nonprofits that are trying to solve that same issue. And I think there's some real magic there in terms of understanding that you don't have to solve a social issue all on your own. That's not the point. But if you can figure out your piece of the puzzle that really moves the needle along and fills a gap in your community, then that can make a tremendous difference. You figuring out your puzzle piece might enable a nonprofit to deliver their impact in a better way, and it might bring together missing pieces that are in a community. When we started Wild Tiger Teas, we started this a work program for youth experiencing homelessness. We brought it in as a brand new idea to a Give Back Hack event. We got selected to work on it over the weekend and we fleshed out the details. And a few months later, we were doing a prototype, but we had no experience screen printing t-shirts. We had no experience working with youth who are experiencing homelessness. Now, fortunately, going into that, before I pitched the idea, I had met Ann Bishop, who was the CEO for the Star House. The Star House is a drop-in center in Columbus for youth experiencing homelessness, and they get over 1,500 youth through their doors every year. They wanted to build out their work program. And I knew this ahead of time going into Give Back Hack. And I had talked to Anna. I was like, hey, if I come up with an idea, would you be willing to partner with us? Now, the Star House was really thrilled to have somebody come in and run this work program inside of their facility. They offered us access to their art room, access to working inside of their facility where we could directly work with the youth. Some of our profits went directly back to the Star House, but we were able to pay the youth then and there inside the art room, creating opportunities for them to get work experience. And then we structured the program so that we were giving them feedback, team development, kind of general communication. How do you show up on a job and pay attention? A lot of those like really basic key skills that were foundational for the youth that we were serving. Now, for us, it was fantastic having this big nonprofit who was like, yeah, you can come into our art room and, run your work sessions. It was beneficial for them because they got to add programming that they didn't have the staff or the funding to put on. And we didn't have to pay for rent. We didn't have to pay for, outreach to actually find the youth that we were working with. We just had to build a screen printing business where we went out and got orders from the community that we could then bring into the Star House to run our work program. That kind of partnership is brilliant. Nonprofit has a need which isn't covered by their existing funding. It might be an opportunity for you to figure out your piece of the puzzle and solve it. All right, so far we've talked about these kind of two sides of building a business, right? The first is understanding your target audience, and then the dream outcome that they want to achieve, and figuring out what your offer is to help bridge that gap. The other light bulb moment I learned from Ali Abdaal's 1K challenge was that as you start to develop offers of different sizes, so maybe you have a $10 digital product or a $2,000 consulting package, that they all should fit into the same flow of helping that same target audience reach that same dream outcome. The same goes for your content too. So your content should act as a bridge, giving people information or ideas or resources on how to achieve that same dream outcome. Basically, you create this flow that's all tied together of being that resource for people trying to solve a common dream outcome. And I think this is key for a social enterprise as well. Like, you're trying to create your impact, being able to be very clear that the activities that you engage in, the way that you employ people, the way that you deliver results and work in the community is all consistent, all trying to solve the same social issue as well as have the same business model that's solving a similar problem. If you can start to figure out that consistency between your messaging, your content, your products, your offers, how you do business, then it has a multiplier effect, which really grows over time. Now, after the 1K challenge, Ali Abdaal launched this Lifestyle Business Academy. It was taking this to the next level. Like, in the 1K challenge, we were playing with $10 digital products. In the Lifestyle Business Academy, the aim is to build a lifestyle business that earns over $100,000 a year by creating offers at a different scale. Basically, offers that are like between $2,000 to $10,000 and finding the people that will pay for that experience. Quite often means that you're going from a small, fun little digital product to working with other businesses and solving real needs that those businesses have, and then generating conversations through your content that lead to opportunities for you to do discovery, learn about somebody's problems, and then actually sell. This for me has been transformational in terms of like how to approach business, because I think quite often when working with social entrepreneurs, my thinking was always like, all right, hey, here's your business model. You're putting together your product. You're going out and trying to find people who are going to purchase it, but you're really focused on building your product first and then trying to sell it. The approach in Lifestyle Business Academy is like, how can you have conversations with your target audience, right? How can you use LinkedIn or Instagram to really reach out to people, get on a phone call with them, and start to learn about how they're experiencing the problem that you're trying to solve. And then after that learning, being able to pitch a really high ticket offer to them, say, here's what you can do in order to sell. For me, one, this has brought up my own insecurities in terms of selling, but it's also made me a lot more clear of like, what do I need to learn in order to improve my offer and move it along? For a long time, I've been working in the space with social entrepreneurs, helping apply kind of design thinking and practice, looking at how do you validate your ideas? How do you come up with good revenue streams? All these really key things around developing a good idea and moving it forward. However, as a business, what I'm finding is like, hey, the opportunity is with for-profit or nonprofit companies that are launching new initiatives. How can I apply all these great skills that I have to people who are launching new ideas and trying to get them off the ground? And so I can run workshops. I'm great at facilitating. I'm great at being the type of person that you drop into a situation where it's like, you're not trying to make the playing field for your sports team better. You're trying to figure out what the game is that you're playing. I'm excellent in these scenarios when you drop me in and it's just like, we have this idea, but we don't know how we're getting there. We have a blank slate. What do we do? Now, I know that language of speaking to a social entrepreneur. I have a really strong network there. But moving into this realm of working with small businesses or finding like purpose-driven businesses that maybe they're not social enterprises, like maybe their business doesn't exist to solve that social impact, but they care and they're involved in the community. They're giving back in different ways. I want to work with those people, but they show up in different places. They meet in different places. They speak a different language. They have different needs in their life, right? So for me, it's like this whole new process of learning how to connect with a different group, how to speak their language, how to understand what their problems are and how I can best support them. It's interesting because part of this is really scary, right? I think being an entrepreneur, you're putting yourself outside of your comfort zone when you're developing a new product or service. I have to remind myself that my 25 years in tech, being a CTO, developing a tech platform, working with big corporate clients, there came a lot of discovery, ideation, and processes in order to make that more efficient. Then working with social entrepreneurs, the same thing, right? You get into this really gritty area where it's like people have an idea that they love, but how do they get some feedback that's really useful? And so it's really taking this concept and applying it to a new area. But what I'm doing is exactly this. I'm going on LinkedIn. I'm finding people who I imagine are in my target audience, and I'm reaching out to them and seeing if I can get a call with them. Seeing if they respond to, here's the problem that I'm solving in the world. And I'm getting calls. I'm having calls with those people. I'm pitching, hey, here's my offer. Now, I think developing a business in this way is just a very different mindset from a lot of the social enterprises that I work with. And I think there's something really valuable here to think in terms of like, yes, if I was to think of what I'm selling and take it up a notch to the next level, who would buy that? How can I take these skills that I have and turn it into something really fantastic? And for me, I think this is a new way of approaching business and being an entrepreneur. Nobody teaches you this. Like, they don't have good classes in business school that are like, here's how you actually do sales and get on the phone with somebody and offer them something of value. I think it's a select few who say, yeah, I'm going to actually take that challenge. And to be honest, like, you know, if you go to business school, quite often you get a corporate job, you're in investment banking or consulting or something like that, where sales isn't core to your job. Yeah, there are people who go in and become salespeople, right? And that's a very different experience when you're selling something that another company has developed. But as an entrepreneur, you're both developing your business and trying to sell it. And so you have to figure out that communication of connecting with people, understanding the problems and how you're going to solve them. So in this episode for People Helping People, I just wanted to paint this picture of like a new way you can approach developing revenue streams, something that is really tied in with some customer learning to give yourself feedback and ideas of like what you might use as a process in order to kickstart that. So if you are a social enterprise and you're looking like, how do I start building a better revenue stream? These are the building blocks that you should start with. One, be very clear about that target audience for both the people that are buying your products and the people that you're creating an impact for. Number two, understand that desired outcome that you're trying to help them achieve. What's the problem that you're solving for them? And do that for both the people that are giving you money and the people that you're trying to impact. And then third, go out and have conversations with people, right? You're not going to move forward if you're not having conversations on a regular basis. So how can you find that target audience, get in front of them, start having those conversations, and do discovery where you're learning about their experience with a problem that you'd like to solve. That doesn't mean getting feedback on your idea. Sometimes, yes, there's a place for saying, do I have the right product? But when you're starting, quite often there's this question of what's the willingness to pay that people have to solve a problem? And can you develop that learning there? Later on, you can figure out that product fit of like, hey, yep, do I have the right product that people will pay for? I think the other key shift from this podcast is really how can you make your content and your product offers and your conversations all consistent with solving that same dream outcome for your target audience? And then finally, how do you take it up a notch, right? How do you create an offer that, you know, somewhere between $2,000 to $10,000 that delivers real value for somebody where they'd be willing to pay that amount in order to solve that problem? Now, engagements with small businesses, you know, that's a strategy project, right? If you can run a workshop for 50 people and you just charge them $50, right? That's $2,500. Think on that scale. You can do a coaching package with somebody, $500 for 4 sessions, and give out, hey, here's a structured way that I'm going to solve this problem. So many different ways that you can spin that. But as a starting point, use that framework to think, hey, how am I structuring my revenue and being really clear about your target audience and the problem that you're solving for them. If this is you and you're diving into it and you're like, I don't know where to start, I'd love to have a conversation, reach out to me. This is the core of what I do, is helping people build better revenue streams. I would love to have a chat with you and talk through what you're doing. Likewise, if you're a small business and you have a new initiative or an idea that you're trying to flesh out, reach out, take a look at what I offer, because I have solutions to help you get off the right foot with an initiative, making sure that you have alignment among your stakeholders, a very clear structured 30-day plan of like, here's what we're going to do to get off the ground. And part of that is building in the accountability and measurements for success to make sure that you're actually moving in the right direction. And you know whether you're going in the right direction or you're just stumbling over and going nowhere. So thank you very much for listening to today's episode of People Helping People. Tune in next week for another episode where we dive in with a guest, sharing some actionable frameworks on how to support you as a social entrepreneur or social impact business. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, cheers.